Today in Studio 4, we meet Jim Denovan. He's a nomadic chef and artist who, when he's not making large pictures in the sand, stages elaborate down-home dinners on farms. He calls his outdoor suppers outstanding in the field. And he is outstanding in his field. We meet arts and culture visionary academic Ron Burnett, who along with Bob Dylan and Margaret Atwood has been knighted by the French government. He is now a Chevalier and the president of Emily Carr University of Art and Design, an institution he simply loves. And to begin the hour, don't worry, you can be neurotic and happy. Mental health expert David Granirer uses comedy as medicine. He teaches people who have mental health issues how to stand up and use humor to build self-confidence. Stay with us. David Granirer is a former class clown who has turned himself into a stand-up comic and a professional mental health counselor. In his early 30s, he was diagnosed with severe depression. He learned firsthand it was nothing to laugh about. David believes we can be happy, productive, and well-adjusted while remaining as neurotic as ever. It is my pleasure to welcome David Granirer back to Studio 4 to tell us more. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
How do you define neurotic?
I think I define neurotic as someone who worries too much, someone who obsesses over things, someone who has a lot of self-doubt, those sorts of characteristics, yeah.
That's pretty much all of us.
I think so, yeah. It's a pretty common one.
And some days are better than others.
That's right.
So a happy neurotic is someone who accepts the fact that we're a bit off some days?
Yeah, I think a happy neurotic is someone who accepts that and sort of embraces it and also realizes that our neurosis is often what stands behind our success. So I think the fact that a neurotic person is involved in a project and they obsess about things and they worry and they use that worry to succeed is a really healthy characteristic.
Well, and some of us grew up with don't worry, be happy.
Right.
Lots of pressure to be happy today.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's huge.
And perfect.
That's right.
Body, mind, spirit, perfect.
That's right. Always spiritually aligned and connected. And yeah, you read those books that promise all this wonderful stuff. You know, if I'm perfectly aligned, millions of dollars will flow into my life and all that kind of stuff. And
if I just put it out there, you mean?
Yeah, right. If I just put it out there.
If I imagine it?
If I imagine it, it'll flow into my... But I have to believe when I'm imagining it. So if I imagine it and it doesn't happen because I don't believe enough, and then I have to buy another book to help me believe or take another workshop.
Well, I know you saw The Secret a few years ago, and it was about the law of attraction, and if we can visualize it and put the Rolls Royce in our driveway, one day we'll have one.
Yes.
I know that's simplistic.
No, I think that's pretty much what it says. I don't think that's simplistic at all.
But you're not encouraging people to walk around and be cynical about everything or negative about anything. That's not your message.
No, I think it's more about being realistic about things, and not, because as far as I'm concerned, books like The Secret, it's a very childlike view of the world. So if only I do this, then wonderful things will happen. And it's an illusion of control. There are certainly things in life that we can control, and there's lots of stuff that we can't control. So I have no complaint when I'm on a plane, if it crashes or not. It doesn't matter. I can be the most positive person in the world. I have no control over that plane. I can delude myself into thinking I have control, but the truth is that I don't.
And sometimes the pilot has no control.
Yeah.
Metaphysicians will tell you, however, that thoughts are real forces.
Right.
And mind, body, spirit is integrated, and it's important that we connect.
Yep.
And embrace our dark side and embrace our light side.
Certainly. And I think thoughts are definitely important, and yet I think it's important to be realistic about what thoughts can accomplish and what they can't accomplish. I think thoughts can certainly help us to be happier, to be more focused, to succeed, but I don't think thoughts can help us from stopping that plane to crash. Something I talk about in my book is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. You know, he survived the concentration camps, and he talks about how some of the best people he met were the people who died, the people who had strong faith and believed, and there was no rhyme or reason. It was like a lottery.
But many prisoners of war who survived could go happy places in their head.
Yes.
In the most dire circumstances, they could somehow get themselves to a golf course and a better time.
Well, and Viktor Frankl talks about that. He said that, you know, at one point, him and a friend make sure that each day they're going to make up something funny so they can get a laugh. Here they are in Auschwitz or something like that. But the thing is, it didn't change. Like, I've actually heard people say, well, you know, if Viktor Frankl, if people like that had believed enough, they could have overcome and not, you know, Auschwitz wouldn't have gotten them or something. You know, it's like, come on, you know.
Sure, and we do learn from pain.
Yeah.
And tragedy. No question
Unfortunately,
about that.
But there was no amount of positive thinking that could make Auschwitz go away. You know, it's like you're in there. However, you're right. For those moments, they could create some good moments for themselves, and I'm sure that's what helped them
And we do
survive.
have the power as humans to choose how we think about it now.
Definitely.
And where we go with it now.
Totally.
Take me back to your depression diagnosis, 30 years old, something like that.
So I realize now that my depression hit when I was in my late teens. I attempted suicide at that point. And the sad thing was that no one picked it up. So for years after that, I thought it was normal to go around feeling like someone had died. And I just thought, well, doesn't everyone feel this way? And in my early 30s, I had this psychiatrist, and it took her about 3 years, because I was in my new age phase where I thought all drugs were bad. And she said, David, I think you're depressed. No, I'm fine. You know, I'll fix this with vitamins in there. I'm fine. And finally, you know, I was just feeling so bad, I gave it a shot. And all of a sudden, after a couple of weeks, it was like, oh, these drugs are great.
And they're legal.
Yeah, they're legal.
And they're legal. Take me back to your suicide attempt. You said no one paid too much attention.
Well, I was in a psych ward for 6 weeks, but no one ever told me what I had. No one diagnosed it. They kind of treated me like, oh, you know, you're a screwed up teen, and this is part of your teenage angst, and you know, you're trying to get attention and all this kind of. But there was no. I mean, I look at the standard of care today, where I think it would have been a lot better. But this was back when there was no education around mental illness, mental health.
After your suicide attempt, when you felt dark, went into the black hole.
Yeah.
How did you get out without proper medication or meditation or something?
Well, you know, it's a funny thing. It was kind of like the weather. It would sort of come and go. Like there were days that were okay. And actually, I should be really honest. Another way I got out was I smoked tons of pot. That was my, you know, I had no idea. I thought I was doing it because it was fun. Now I look back and I think, no, it was the only thing that made me feel good for years.
So you're masking anything that's going on?
I was self-medicating, essentially.
Tripping.
Yeah.
Trusting the universe.
Well, not necessarily trusting my dealer.
Yes, and I hope you don't get arrested, because that's in your past, right?
That's right. Doesn't happen anymore.
But one of your main points, certainly in The Happy Neurotic, is negative emotions are not your enemy necessarily.
No.
The billion-dollar industry trying to make us perfect.
Yeah.
That's not so good. How did you get into the field of mental health, and why?
I was a musician for a bunch of years, and then something happened. I played guitar, and I could no longer play for a long period of time because I had tendinitis, which is sort of an occupational hazard. And I just floundered for a couple of years, and then I started doing volunteer work at the Vancouver Crisis Center and realizing I like this. This is really cool, and that sort of turned my life around and focused me on the area of counseling.
When you were at the Crisis Center, did you see you and them?
Oh,
when
definitely.
People called?
Definitely. I mean, I saw lots of people, but I certainly saw myself, and I could certainly relate. You know, what I had been through certainly made me able to relate to people going through crisis and going through despair and things like that.
And then I'm assuming you went back to your days in the classroom when you were entertaining and probably spending a lot of time in the principal's office as the class clown. And somehow you married your interest in the crisis center and your bout of depression and your comedic timing to do what you do now.
Yeah, well, I eventually was hired as a trainer, a staff member at the crisis center. So I had a captive audience of people who had to listen to my jokes. And I thought, hey, I'm getting pretty good. And then I went down to Punchlines one night to do an amateur night, and I completely bombed. But later on, a few months later, I took a class, and the next time I got up, it was great. It was showcased with all our friends, and it was wonderful, and I was hooked. I knew I had to do stand-up comedy, and also stand-up for mental health evolved from that because of what it did for me. And I would see people who took my course at Granirer College, which has nothing to do with mental health. They would come through and they would have life-changing experiences from doing stand-up. And I thought, let's put this in a format where people who want the life-changing experience can get it through comedy. And that's how Stand Up for Mental Health started.